let's talk probiotics because they are everywhere. Everybody seems to be on one. And as the gut doctor, what's your opinion about it?
My opinion on probiotics is like multivitamins. Do we have clear and compelling evidence that a multivitamin does anything for the average person? We don't. What we know from some studies is that people who take vitamins also have healthy habits. So vitamin takers tend to be exercisers and clean eaters and meditators, etc. But we don't have evidence outside of that the vitamin itself in a healthy person. Now, there are plenty of instances where a vitamin can be helpful. For example, the patients I see who have Crohn's disease, many of them have low B12 because the Crohn's can affect the small intestine, the ileum. The dogs jump in, duodenum, jejunum, ileum. And so they don't absorb the B12 in the ileum and they need to be supplemented. Or they may have low iron because they're not absorbing iron or because they're bleeding or their vitamin D may be low. So in that setting, those vitamins play a really important role. But the idea that somebody who's healthy, who doesn't have Crohn's or some other reason to have a specific vitamin deficiency, needs stuff. And in fact, when we look at vitamin D, a lot of us are deficient. And there are two reasons for that. One, we don't get enough sun exposure. But the second reason is that they moved the level. They changed the level from what is normal. They bumped it up. And so a third of the country became vitamin D deficient. Now, I don't know why they chose to do that, the government, but I suspect it had a lot to do with lobbying from supplement manufacturers. I'm sure there was medical evidence also that said the previous lower limit of normal of 25, that got moved up to 32. So everybody who was in the high 20s who decades ago had normal vitamin D now is vitamin D deficient. But here's the thing. We see a lot of problems with vitamin D toxicity from people just willy-nilly taking massive amounts of vitamin D, thinking mistakenly that the higher the better. That's not how it works. There's a range. There's a range, and you don't want to exceed that range. Now, for some vitamins and minerals and things, if you have extra, you just pee it out. It's not a big deal. But vitamin D isn't one of those. So you want to be careful about vitamin D toxicity. And so when people take these various supplements and things, I think they have a sense a lot of the time that, well, it couldn't hurt, right? So it may help, it can't hurt. Even something like a probiotic, if you're taking multiple different species, those bacteria, assuming that there are actually live bacteria in the probiotic, because there's very little regulation, a lot of times the bacteria are dead. But let's say the product does contain what it says it contains, these live bacteria. They are potentially competing for resources with other bacterial species, even the native ones in your gut that are actually working and trying to do their thing. And now they're like, oh, wait, there's not enough of, whatever resources is we need to eat. And so you can be altering your microbial composition for the worse by taking a probiotic.
Oh, God. Well, I feel like I'm in the camp of everything you just said. It can't hurt. And so I'll just keep taking all these things and my body will just pee out whatever I don't need. So that's one mistake I'm clearly making. Second mistake that I'm making is I'm taking the probiotic and then I'm taking a different probiotic. And then I'm also eating the yogurt and the kimchi. And I'm just making this gigantic sort of bacteria salad.
But eat the kimchi for sure.
Right.
I mean, we have great data on fermented foods. And a lot of this is from the Sonneborn lab at Stanford. So we know that kimchi and sauerkraut are powerhouse foods. They contain a combination of prebiotics, which is a fiber. So let's take sauerkraut.
Okay.
That's the fiber, it's made from cabbage. So you have the fiber to feed the bacteria. But in the fermentation process, you're also producing lactobacillus. So you have the probiotic. And then as part of that fermentation process, you're creating metabolites like short-chain fatty acids. Those are postbiotics. So kimchi and sauerkraut are this powerhouse combination of pre, pro, and postbiotics. And there's really compelling data that eating even a tablespoon of sauerkraut a day can provide multiple different species, important metabolites. So this is ultimately sort of medicinal food.
Wow.
Things like the sauerkraut and kimchi. So by all means, keep doing that.
So
sure.
Dr. Robin, can you just give us a short list of probiotic foods that we can eat instead of taking a probiotic?
Of prebiotic foods or probiotic foods.
I don't even whichever ones I'm supposed to eat. Okay. What are what is the list of pre and probiotic foods?
For prebiotic, which are the foods to feed the bacteria, think high fiber and think stringy fiber like asparagus and celery, and also things like oats, dandelion greens. These are all great foods, fibrous foods to feed your bacteria. For probiotic foods, think about fermented. They also contain prebiotic with the fiber, but think about fermented foods because those are producing bacteria during the fermentation process. And I do want to say, it's not that a probiotic is a total waste of time. In my practice, where I treat really sick patients with Crohn's and ulcerative colitis, there are probiotics on the market that have the FDA label as a medicinal food. This is a medical food for the treatment of inflammatory bowel disease, etc. They're products that have over 100 different scientific studies behind them showing that they work for these particular conditions. But that's different, right? That's like the B12 for the Crohn's patient. That's not the average person. The data that the average person gets a lot of health benefit, or really any health benefit, from taking a probiotic is a little murkier. And my concern is always that people are going to say, oh, I don't need to change my diet or really pay attention to that because I'm taking the probiotic. I mean, you're actually eating the kimchi and doing all the other stuff, which is fantastic.
And I'm popping the probiotic.
And I think you're probably okay, but you don't need it. But I do want to caution people, if you're taking these high dose probiotics, are you potentially using up resources at your native bacteria that need these resources? And remember,
how would you know? Like, would you be bloated even though you're taking a probiotic? Like, how would you know that it's backfiring?
You really don't. You really don't. There's not a test we can do for that. But what I want people to remember is that when you take a probiotic product, those bacteria may be living half an hour, typically under an hour. In order to get meaningful colonization and repopulation of the gut, you have to feed them. And so the food is ultimately more important, because the truth is, it's not that you don't have any healthy bacteria in your gut. The population is low. How do you population may be low. Say you've taken a lot of antibiotics or you've had a crummy diet. How do you manipulate the microbiome and get those healthy species to grow? By feeding them, not by bringing in more species that are basically going to hang around 20 minutes and then you're going to poop them out. So it's really this whole idea of repopulation and recolonization. And we do that by feeding what's already there. And that has been shown, and that's the American Gut Project study with the 30 different plants. When they ask the question, what is the most effective way, what is the most important thing to do to have a healthy microbiome? And this is a study done in over 10,000 people, 40 different countries. So really meaningful data.
And the most effective thing was to get 30 different sources of plant-based foods in your diet once a week.
Yes, throughout the week.
Wow.
So it's still really diet. If you look at an apple that's grown organically, and even better, biodynamically.
What's biodynamically?
Biodynamically is when you have the animals fertilizing the soil.
So you have from a local farm.
Exactly, local farm. I love it. Yes,
gotcha.
That is
okay.
Exactly, local, because it's going to be more nutrient and microbe rich because it's not traveled 3,000 miles on a plane and barely alive when it gets to you.
In order to keep the thing.
So an apple, you can get millions of microbes from eating an apple grown locally.
So, Dr. Robin, I'm just imagining that the person listening is sitting here next to me, and we have come to you because we feel bloated, or we're struggling with IBS or constipation or whatever. And so it is just kind of a classic gut issue. What are the 3 small habits that you would like us to start implementing into our day-to-day life that are the best things that we could do that will build a healthy, beautiful kind of gut microbiome and get our gut system working correctly?
There are tons of things to do, but if I had to distill it down to 3, I would say it's hydration, it's movement, and it's fiber. And the movement, remember that it's smooth muscle, it's not skeletal muscle, so it's not under voluntary control, but we know that movement creates nitric oxide, and nitric oxide is part of what keeps the heart healthy and keeps the gut healthy. And so the movement stimulates peristalsis. If you don't have things moving through in a timely fashion, not only do you have symptoms like bloating and constipation, but you also have stasis of those intestinal contents, and you have bacterial overgrowth because things aren't moving through. So the movement is really important. And I found that since pandemic, so many of us are so sedentary. I know that I'm not at the hospital a few days a week anymore, back and forth, where I'm probably walking 4 or 5 miles every day. I'm sitting a lot more. And I think we've seen a huge effect of that, of the effect of being sedentary on the gut. So we need to stimulate gut peristalsis. The people we see with the worst GI problems are people in nursing homes. And it's not because they're elderly, it's because they're not moving.
Wow.
So movement is really key. Hydration, I can't say it enough times. Plumbing, we've got to unclog those pipes. And then the fiber, because the fiber feeds our gut microbes so they can ferment that fiber, create all the healthy metabolites. And it doesn't have to be like some enormous kale salad. It can literally be grab a carrot as you're walking out the door and chomp on it. Throw an apple in your car, eat some nuts, something basic, ideally something unprocessed. I am so curious about your poop.
Oh, what do you want to know about my poop?
I think I have a feeling that you have wonderful poos.
Do you really want to know?
Yes, I really want to know.